Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to see so many of you coming on already. We're going to have a really amazing group of women together today. I'm Deonesea. We're going to give a couple more minutes for other women to join us before we dive in. But if you would, while we're here and giving those couple of minutes, send me a chat message in the chat. Let me know if you can hear me well, if you can see me well. That'd be super helpful for us to get started. Anybody? Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks, Chandra. Awesome. I'm really happy to hear that everything's working well. I'm super excited to dive in with you all today. I've got some really juicy content for you. And hi, Gina. Hi, Irma. Thanks. That's great to hear. I so appreciate that. It looks like we're a go for sound and for visual. So that's really good. I do want to encourage you to continue using the chat throughout our time together today. It's really sweet, really fun to see you all chiming in. And we're going to be using that chat later for some Q&A, so it's great you've already got it down. So here we are, 4 o'clock, and like I said, we're going to give just a couple more minutes for people to be coming in. But I do want to go ahead and say, because we've got that Q&A coming up later today, if you have any burning questions or burning desires around the topic of today's webinar, definitely let those go ahead and start bubbling up for you so that you can put them in the chat later on for us all to get to hear what your thoughts are and what's really in your heart, and what a blessing that will be for the other women who are attending and probably have some of the same kinds of questions and thoughts that you're having. So wow, navigating negative relationship dynamics. That seems to really be something that a lot of women are coming up against, and I can really relate to that. A little later on, I'll be sharing more about myself and how I come to be teaching about these things. But I just do want to say up front, we've had a really huge response to this topic, and I feel that that really speaks to where we are in our world and in ourselves as we're growing and learning to embody our feminine, and coming up against the walls we come up against when we're relating with others. So I'm super excited about this topic and what we can get into with it together today. And I have a lot I really want to bring to you. So I'll be looking forward to hearing what's moving in you, what's true for you, what's brought you here today. What is it that's happening in your world that that learning to navigate in this way is something that's important to you. So please feel free to go ahead and keep chiming in as you come on, and give us a little something in the chat to let us know that you're here. It's really fun to see more and more people coming on. Hi, Anita. Hi, Audrey. Hi, Renee. J.I. Hi, Julie. Nice to see you here. Laura, Rhonda, Shannon. Beautiful. Thanks, ladies, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come together today and explore with me. And hi, Shannon, Anna, Egel, Michelle. Yeah, as I've been naming already, for those of you who are just coming on, we're just taking a couple of minutes to give space for women to keep coming on before we really dive in together today. And I was encouraging everyone to start sort of feeling into what is it that's brought you to this kind of a call today, and what's really moving in your heart, what's true for you, how is this sort of navigation of negative relationship dynamics important to you. We're going to have some Q&A. Hi, Paula, later today to let you chime in, and I do want to encourage you to keep saying hello in the chat box as you're coming on, ladies. Welcome. It's so great to see so many of us gathering here today. And hi, Narelle. And we're going to be using that chat box later on for our Q&A. So it's great to see you've all got the hang of it. That's working. That's in there. All right. So I think now's a good time for us to dive in, and ladies can keep joining as they come to it. I'll first take a moment to just let you know how our call today is going to evolve, how we're going to move through this hour together. It is my experience that an hour can seem like a heartbeat when we really dive into something that's important to us. So it's important to me today in this hour to give you as much content as I can and to address as many of your questions as I can while we have this time together. Again, I want to say I'm super delighted that you've taken the time to show up. I think this is a super important topic for so many women and men too. And when we show up, when we come to ourselves and learn more about ourselves and what we can bring to the equation, then it really helps our men as well. Or even same-sex relationships. I will be speaking in heterosexual language today because that's my orientation and where most of my clients are coming from, but it is my experience that these same kinds of dynamics show up in same-sex relationships as well. So I just want to say upfront that I welcome all sexual orientations to our call today, and that this really isn't about gender so much, I think, as it is about our essence selves and how we show up with that and the kinds of things that have happened in our lives that bring us to our walls and our blockages and the things that we're hoping to move through and overcome as we move along. So today we're going to begin with a little centering and grounding exercise to sort of bring ourselves all together here in the present moment. And from there, I'll be telling you a bit more about me and who I am and how I've come to be. Hi, Maria. Thanks for that. Yeah, we're going to be covering a lot of those things today. She says, standing in my needs versus other people's needs reflected in manipulation, overcoming martyr patterns. Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about those things, where they come from, how we can navigate them, what that's really about. So that'll be sort of the meat of our call together today. After I've, like I said, brought us into circle and some centering exercises and sharing a little bit about myself and my journey and how I come to be sitting in front of you here today, as well as some information about her mystery school, which I think is the way that many of you have come to be here, is through Jumana, who, as you know, is amazing. I think most of you have experienced her work through many of her courses, her online courses, and her mystery school is an amazing, amazing reflection of her and her work and how so many of the feminine principles flow through her. So I'll be describing some of that to you up front today as well. And then we're going to dive into the teaching aspect of our call, where I'll be addressing this topic of these negative relationship dynamics, specifically manipulation, what that is, what it feels like, how you can tell when you're in it, when you're not, and why we as women sort of chronically overgive and what that calls out in our men or in our significant other. I'll be diving pretty deeply into that information with you today. And then in about the last 20 minutes of our call, we'll go into Q&A so that how those things are affecting you and how it brings up questions for you and your concerns about those things, so that we can talk about those all together and really address what's true for you. So let's get straight to it. I want to come now into a practice to sort of ground and center ourselves here all together. So I want to invite you, wherever you are, to slow down in whatever way that you can, ideally to stop, sit, and rest and listen. And to close your eyes and drop into your breath. So there are many, many kinds of practices we can use to sort of ground and center ourselves. And in my experience, one of the most potent and easily accessible ones is our breath. So let's just go straight there today. So coming to a still point in whatever way that you can. Dropping into your breath so that you're taking deep belly breaths in and exhaling fully out. And if you can, where you are right now, closing your eyes and continuing to breathe deeply in. And we're gonna go into a practice right now that I call gathering in the tendrils. So I just want to invite you, as you keep breathing, to sort of feel your body, feel yourself wherever you are. Deep belly breath so that your belly expands when you inhale and flattens as you exhale. And as you breathe in this way, I invite you to start gathering in your tendrils. And what I mean by that is to start just pulling your energetic self back from all of where you've been, all of what you've been doing up to this point in your day. Whether that's being with your children, being with your spouse, being with your significant other, being at work, taking care of your to-do list, whatever it is that you've been doing up to this point in your day, just sort of consciously pulling your energy back to those people and those activities into you. So I see them as tendrils, like vines that reach out and wrap around and interconnect with others, tasks and people. And right now, as you breathe, belly rising and falling with breath, just gathering all of those tendrils back into yourself. Bringing yourself fully into this moment right here, right now. Allowing yourself to let go of anything you've done in your day up to this point, anything that you've done up to this point in your week, anything that's still hanging out for you to do later today or later in your week, just letting all of that go right now, pulling your energy all the way back from those things into you. And imagine that that energy can gather and pool in your belly, so that all of your energy can be gathered into your belly, pooling there and potentizing in a way that you get to hold all of yourself fully in that space. Breathing deeply so that your belly rises with your inhale and falls with your exhale, gathering all of yourself all the way back in. Breathing deeply. And feeling what it feels like to take this time, take these moments to close your eyes, get to your breath, collect yourself, come all the way back in, feeling your energy, all of you just gathered in your belly. How's that feel? And imagining right now that from your belly, you can extend a root that's going to reach down through your perineum, down through your yoni, down through where you're sitting, and into the earth below you. And that Gaia, our Earth Mother, receives that root from you. She receives you and is ready to nourish you and nurture you, sending her energy up through that root into you, so that here you are, gathered and collected, potent in your belly and connected to the earth beneath you. Deep belly breath in and full exhale out. One more time, deep belly breath in and full exhale out. So it's from this place of being gathered, being present, being grounded, that I'd like for us to move forward into our time together today. I do want to say to women who are just coming on as we've been in meditating and gathering, please announce yourself in the chat box. We'd love to hear you, know that you're with us. We will be using the chat box later today for some Q&A. And I'd just love to see you. Hi, Devin, coming in and announcing yourselves and making yourselves known. We're so delighted that you're here. I want to take a moment to just sort of invite you to visualize that we're standing in a circle and we're able to hold hands with each other. So here we are, this collective of women gathered together to do this great work with each other, and that we can see ourselves in this sort of etheric circle all together. Because ultimately, this is big work, ladies. This is, from my perspective, the great work. Our relationships are the ground in which we get to see ourselves sometimes most clearly and most painfully in our lives. And aloha, Janice. And the way that we come to our relationships and navigate the kinds of things that come up for us really do propel us through our lives. And I think in a huge way that we as women coming to the forefront with the feminine rising in us like she is right now, we're going to be what takes our world forward. And so much of that is based in our intimate relationships and how we make our way through them. And it's on us in a big kind of way to sort of invite our men along with us, or our significant others along with us. Hi, Shira. Hi, Christina. Great to see you all showing up. Please, ladies, keep chiming in. We're going to have a lot of time in that Q&A box with the chat box later today. So I do want to say that I am hearing a little bit of background noise. If you've come in and your audio is on and you can see where you can mute your audio, that'd be super helpful. Or if you're on your phone and can use your mute, that'd be great, so that we don't have any background noise that can be distracting for others. So I want to take just a few minutes to tell you a little bit about me and who I am and how I come to be offering this webinar today, as well as to give you some information about her mystery school that I think is really exciting. And then we're going to dive right into our topic for today. So my name is Deonesea LaFay, and I am a sensuality and intimacy coach. I have been a priestess of the goddess for many, many years now, and leading women's rituals and ceremonies and women's circles for well over a decade. And I have a tremendous background in the study of women's spirituality as well as women's sexuality. And I have a coaching practice based in those things. I am also a mentor for her mystery school, which is this incredible online school for women in the deep feminine mystery teachings. And through the school, I offer a mentorship on Aphrodite's ecstasy, which is all about getting in touch with our sensuality and our sexuality and taking a 9-month journey together through the layers of that and the kinds of blockages we come up against in our sexuality and what it means to live as a sensual woman, as for me, a devotee of Aphrodite, and what that actually is, what that actually means. And I also offer a mentorship on the alchemy of intimacy, which is all about some of what we're going to be covering today, a 9-month journey around taking our patterns that we have chronically experienced in our intimate relationships and transforming them into relationship gold. And we're going to get a taste of that today in this particular topic, but that actually expands out into so many other kinds of patterns as well, and how to transform them and transmute them into something that really works and really gets you to your heart's desire in your intimate life. So that's a little bit about me, and you can see more about me on the mentorship page of the Her Mystery School site. You can also see more about me at my website, which is passionasprayer.com. And again, ladies, I want to keep encouraging you to keep chiming in. It's great to see you continue coming on. Please announce yourself in the chat group so that we can see you. I do want to say a little bit about Her Mystery School right now. I know that many of you come to be here today through Jumana, who, as you know, is amazing. And I know many of you have experienced her work through her online courses. And Her Mystery School is really an expansion of that work into a 9-month journey where women can take really a deep dive into the kinds of feminine wisdom teachings that flow through Jumana as really an oracular voice of the goddess. And it is my experience of the work and the transmissions of Her Mystery School. Hello, Ilka from Australia. That those transmissions and those teachings are both ancient and timeless, and they pull from what seems like a long, long history into a now that's rich and potent and very applicable to our lives today. everywhere from the kind of practice we started with today about gathering ourselves and coming into ourselves, and then exploring what we find when we get in there. Exploring what it is to be in a descent journey. Many of us know those journeys, even if we don't have that language for them, and we maybe don't have tools to navigate those kinds of journeys. And the mystery school really offers that, as well as how to come up out of those journeys into our alchemical power as women, and what we carry inside of ourselves as paradise and as the garden, really. So for those of you who are already in that journey with us, it's sweet to be here in this context with you today. And for those of you who've not yet participated in her mystery school, this is just a huge invitation for you to really check it out, explore it, see whether you feel like it's a good fit for you. We are currently at the midpoint of our journey, this 9-month journey, and we start again at the beginning in September of this year, September 9th, the new moon. And it would be so delightful to have you with us. It really is a rich, potent journey for women. So that's a little bit about me and about my function in the mystery school, and what the mystery school actually is. And good to see you ladies. Keep coming in. It's really great. Thank you for that. So I want to get into today, our topic for today, and what it is we're actually going to be covering. You know, when we started looking at what webinar can we offer to these women that we think would be potent for them and powerful for them, and really sort of aligned with where we know a lot of women are at and where we're coming from, and navigating negative relationship dynamics was the thing that really came through. It feels like it's really time, it's where we are, it's what's happening. And I really appreciate all of you for showing up to it, because I know this is not easy and it can be very confusing. And I want to talk about that confusion today and how we get there and how we can start bringing ourselves out of there. Because I really do feel that our intimate relationships are the great work. They are the work. Yeah, we're starting now. Welcome, come on in. They are the work of looking at ourselves, really seeing deeply into another being, and you know, navigating what we've inherited. And I think that's actually a big piece of why we find ourselves in negative relationship dynamics. We've inherited this. This has been going on the planet for eons, and here we are in this very sort of, on one hand, chaotic, and on another hand, like this amazing precipice for transformation and change. And here we are immersed in it, and what can we do with it? You know, one piece of that really is looking at, well, where did it come from? How did we get here? And we know that so much of how we relate in intimate relationships comes from our upbringing. It comes from what's been coded in us, what's been ingrained in us from our childhood experiences, what's been culturalized in us from the cultures that we grow up in, from our family culture. And that just sort of is what is. It is what we're dealing with. And we have within us the power to be able to start transforming and transmuting those things and making a better way for ourselves. So one of the things that's really come up in the realm of what are these negative dynamics is this sense of manipulation. I think this is something that women feel that they experience a lot, and I think it's something that men feel they experience a lot too. And I do want to take a moment and say right here up front that for me, this topic and this subject is not at all about man bashing or putting men down or not including them in some kind of way. It's actually more about looking at how they're affected and how we're affected. And from my perspective, this idea of negative relationship dynamics actually exists on a spectrum. And at the very low end of that spectrum are abusive relationships and neglectful relationships, and relationships that really are in such hardship that they may not be able to ever come out of that place. And then on the other end of that spectrum, I think, is, you know, just a sort of sense of discontent, a sense that there could be more, but we don't know how to access it, a sense that there's just something missing. And in between is everything from feelings of being manipulated to confusion to not being sure. Is this dynamic happening because of something that's alive in me? Is it happening because of something that's alive in him? Is it happening because we're locked in something that actually is alive in both of us? And if so, how do we unlock it? How do we take ourselves out of it? And if it's mine, how do I address it in me? And if it's him, how do I relate to that? How do I deal with that? And all of those kinds of things can be really challenging to sort out. So let's start with, is it alive in me? Well, one of the most significant indicators of is it alive in me, is it something that I'm bringing to the table, is has it happened in several other relationships before? In my mind, that's a significant indicator. If you can see a pattern or a thread that runs through many of your relationships, then most certainly that's something that's alive in you. And it might be something that you're already consciously aware of, and it might be something that's a pattern that's running in your subconscious. Now, here's an interesting point about that. We know that our subconscious, that we only actually use about 10% of our brain in terms of the realm of consciousness, of what we're consciously thinking about and consciously doing. So when we see a pattern showing up in our life that is the antithesis of what we want and what we think we're doing, then chances are that's a subconscious pattern that got instilled at us in childhood that's playing out in our lives right now. And here's how you know whether that's what's happening. Is it a thread that's been following you? Have you seen it show up in several of your relationships? And are you having an experience that is the opposite of what you tell yourself you're working on creating? So, for example, you tell yourself, I am devoted to having a committed, conscious, intimate relationship. But your experience is that you're with a man you can't fully commit to, or he can't fully commit to you, or you're committed but there's no intimacy. You know, those kinds of things, when you see that the result you're getting is the opposite of what you're telling yourself, then chances are that means that consciously you're telling yourself one thing and unconsciously you're running a pattern that's giving you a different result. So those are a couple of the most potent ways that I know of to be able to see that what you're getting is actually a reflection of something inside, a pattern inside of you that's running itself. So sometimes those patterns are really easy to spot, and sometimes they're super complex. One really, powerful way to get to determine that for yourself is to look at those two questions that I just asked and start writing about them. Like, write down everything that you can see that way. So, for example, if you're in a relationship dynamic right now that feels familiar, then it probably is. It's probably been there for a long time. And my guess would be that if you really worked at it, you could track it all the way back to a familiar feeling as a girl. So there's no wrong in that. There's no self-blame or self-shame in that. There's no judging it even, really. It just is about looking at it, finding the source of it in yourself, and then how can you bring yourself to consciously start changing it? So that's us. That's one way to sort of look at, am I the person who's bringing this to the relationship? Let's look at them. So on the other side, how do we see, am I engaged with a person? Am I involved with a person who's manipulating me? Well, for me, from my perspective, the sort of biggest indicator of whether I'm being manipulated, whether I'm dealing with a manipulative person, is, do I feel confused? Because when I'm being manipulated, definitely I'm feeling confused, because it is confusing. When you're dealing with a person who's telling you something different than what's actually true in yourself, it will feel like, do I really feel that way? Am I really doing that? Do I really behave that way? Do I really show up that way? And, when we're receiving accurate reflection from another human being, from someone who's intimate with us, it doesn't feel confusing. It might feel sad. It might feel painful. because it very likely is touching on a painful point from somewhere in the past, but it doesn't feel confusing. And when that sort of self-questioning comes up, when confusion is associated with that self-questioning, that's almost always an indicator that there is a manipulation happening. So manipulation is a huge subject. There are a lot of ways that we as women manipulate in relationships, and there are a lot of ways that men manipulate in relationships. And that's not really the deepest part of our topic today, but more about how to navigate when we're being manipulated. So, okay, this is a good question about narcissism, narcissistic partners, and gaslighting. So I do want to address that today. So I want to say that there's a difference between clinical narcissism and narcissistic patterns. So I think narcissistic patterns show up in a lot of people, actually, because we live in a fairly narcissistic society. And narcissistic pattern usually looks like being sort of, thanks Jade, being sort of self-absorbed. It means that they're not totally able to show up to who you are because they're so involved in their own selves. And that can actually happen in very loving relationships. You might be in love with a person who still gets self-absorbed for all of their own reasons, maybe their own wounding or their own patterns or difficult life circumstances or whatever that is. And it can show up like, narcissistic behavior where they're not really showing up to you. They're not being present to you. They're not being empathetic to you. Classic narcissism, like clinical narcissistic behavior, is even more intense than that. So this has been a big topic that I've seen showing up across the internet lately, a lot of articles about this. I will share with you that I actually spent 3.5 years in a relationship with a clinical narcissist. And so I actually have in-depth understanding of this dynamic, and I have lived at its effect, and I know what that's like. So inside of a relationship with a narcissist, it's grueling, and it's very confusing, very painful, and very destructive. And one of the biggest ways that you can tell that you're dealing with a narcissist is that they put everything back on you. Nothing in the relationship is their responsibility. They cannot see themselves as reflected by you. They only see their own version of reality. So no amount of reflection that you give them is going to land. They cannot. They're emotionally incapable, just like a 6-year-old child is incapable of tying a necktie. Is that same kind of thing. They actually cannot do it. And what they will do instead is always put it back on you. Always it's your fault. Always it's your problem. Always it's your issue. Thank you, Saraswati. And it's crazy making. It will have you always questioning yourself, always wondering how you haven't grown beyond this, always wondering how you allowed yourself to be in such a thing, always wondering how could you be so messed up, because they will tell you over and over again how messed up you are. And it is destruction, absolute destruction of self-esteem. So those kinds of relationships, I do want to say that if you can identify that you are actually in a relationship with a narcissist, get out is the only thing to do. They cannot and will not change. They will never be able to love you, really, truly love with presence who you are, because they cannot see past themselves. It is just as insidious an illness as personality disorder. That's actually essentially what it is. And so it's not to say that those people don't deserve to be loved. It's to say that if your desire is to have a true relationship where you are cherished and adored as a woman, you will never get it from a narcissistic person. They cannot. So I did want to address that because I know that it can be really difficult to determine what you're actually dealing with. Are you dealing with a narcissist? Are you dealing with a sociopath? Um, um, are you dealing with just some narcissistic issues? And sort of the defining thing there is whether they can self-reflect. So a person who has a serious personality disorder like that does not have the ability to self-reflect. They will always push it out on you. If you're dealing with a person who's sort of presenting narcissistically or with narcissistic sort of patterns, that's more like they can see some parts of themselves, but not all. They can sometimes show up, but not always, you know. And I don't even really like to put the words narcissistic on that because I'm a big fan of staying away from buzzwords. And I think narcissism has become kind of a buzzword lately. And I do think people can show up with sort of narcissistic patterning. That does not mean they're a narcissist. So I prefer to sort of think of that as more like self-absorption. And what's true is that true intimacy is not possible in the face of self-absorption, unless the self-absorbed person is ready to step out of themselves enough to be able to be intimate. And, you know, that's actually one of the things that has to be determined along the way. Like, you know, we've talked about, okay, how is this showing up in me? Is this something that they're bringing to the table that doesn't have anything to do with me? And then there's the piece of how we get locked in. So if you're in a relationship with a narcissist or a sociopath or some similar kind of personality disorder like that, what is the piece in you that's allowing you to get locked in that? Because something is. And in my experience, that comes from deep childhood wounding around feeling that something is wrong with us. So whenever, as children, we experience any kind of trauma, this is actually huge for women who've been sexually abused as children. When we Thanks, Michelle. That's a really, really great question. I'm going to get to that. When we have had a parent who disappeared, when we had absent parents, people neglect can be just as serious in this realm as active abuse. In the realm of us determining as children that we're not worthy of being loved, that we're not worthy of being seen. This comes from the lack of accurate mirroring. So ideally, as children, we have parents or adults in our environment who can see who we really are. Oh, Deonesea, you love playing with dollies. Let's make sure you have enough dollies to play with. Oh, you love dancing. Well, let's make sure you get enough dance lessons. You know, and the flip side of that, when we're dealing with sort of narcissistic grooming, and I'm not talking about having narcissistic parents, like a parent who is a narcissist. I'm talking about having narcissistic parenting styles, which looks like this. I'm your dad, and I love going out fishing on the lake, and I can't even see that dancing is what you love. So for us to have time and bonding together, I'll take you out fishing on the lake with me. And it becomes all about the child having to meet what the parent loves to be able to have relationship in which they feel loved. So I want to see if I can say that a different way, just so I make sure that I'm being really clear. Accurate mirroring is about being seen for who I am. It means the other person, the adult in the situation, if I'm the child, can look at me and see me and who I am and relate to me from that place, even if it's not meaningful to them. If I've got a father who doesn't care at all about ballet, it doesn't matter because he knows that I love it, so he's going to show up to me in that way. But if I have a father who sees I love ballet and doesn't want to participate in that with me at all, doesn't want to show up to it, and maybe even goes as far as to talk about how stupid ballet is, and the only way that we're going to relate is if I go to the lake fishing with him, then that is narcissistic parenting. It doesn't give accurate mirroring. It doesn't mean the father is a narcissist. It just means that it's narcissistic style behavior. And what the result of that behavior is in adult women is that we overgive. we show up to their needs. We show up to what they love. We show up to what they want. We show up to what they want to do, instead of staying rooted and grounded and centered in ourselves and in what we love and in what we need and in what we want and what we want to do. And yeah, and so that's sort of a baseline place that many of us as women come into our adult relationships with. It's how we were groomed to be in relationships. And so once we realize that's what's happening, if we want to turn that boat around, it can be both the mother and the father. Yes, it can be one or the other or both. It can be adoptive parents. It can be grandparents. It can be any number of adult caregivers in our lives. And but it's this kind of grooming happens specifically with the caregivers that are the closest to us in our lives. Ideally, for a woman who's been raised in that way, she had at least some other adult influence in her life, whether that was a grandparent or the mother of a friend or a teacher or somebody who could see her and sort of help her along. Those women who've had that in their lives sort of tend to already have some sense of what they love, and then from that place with the right tools can take it pretty easily to come out of those self-deprecating places, those places that are about lack of self-worth and self-value. So we had a question here about this that I do want to answer. And the question is, what about an avoidant attachment style and how that plays into this topic? Someone who's repeatedly hot and cold. Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you know anything about attachment theory, we can break that down into sort of 3 adult attachment styles. There's the avoidant, which is what the question is about. There's the anxious, and there's the secure. So just briefly, without getting too far into this, an avoidant attachment style is someone who deep down wants intimacy. They want to be close. But each time they get to closeness, they engage in all kinds of behaviors and activities that will shut the intimacy down. That often looks like pulling really far away and disappearing and then coming back. And I'm not talking about rubber banding. I'm not talking about just the need for space and a breath and coming back in. I'm talking about like seriously disappearing, no communication, totally withdrawing. It can also look like subtly or overtly putting the other person down so that they can create a feeling of distance. It is my experience that if you are an anxious attachment style, attachment style has a tremendous need for closeness and intimacy. And it takes up a lot of their thinking and a lot of their inner world. And they are the type of people who need to have consistent, maybe even constant communication with the other person. They always need to know that everything's okay in the relationship. They need frequent check-ins. They need daily activity, daily sort of connection. They need a lot of reassurance. They need to sort of know always where the other person is in relation to them. So ideally, either one of those attachment styles would end up with the secure attachment style. So a secure attachment doesn't have either of those things. Instead, they have this sort of steady going base sense of self-worth, self-value, self-love, security, so that Michelle, who wrote in about this avoidant attachment, says anxious plus avoidant equals the law of attraction from hell. And that's absolutely true. In attachment theory, they call when the anxious and the avoidant come together, they call that the anxious avoidant trap. It's very hard to get out of, and it's one of those crazy making, confusing, yeah, a lot of us find ourselves in that kind of relationship. And here's why: because avoidants make up the biggest part of the dating pool. They're the ones who aren't married, who probably have never been married, or if they've been married, yeah, that's right, Devin, they're really hard to get out of. If they've been married, they had this sort of push-pull relationship the whole time through the marriage. And those are the guys who are most available in the dating pool. And so if you're an anxious attachment style, you really want to get behind this. Yeah, I really understand that pain. I've been there too. We're talking about taking 5 years, taking 4 years to get out of those, and how difficult it is to recover beyond them. Those are very painful relationships. We're always, if we're the anxious, we're always trying to get from them, and they're always trying to push us away and not give us any. And it's very, very painful. So ultimately, what we want is to find the secure attachment. And the secure attachment knows their worth, knows they're worthy of love, knows that there are easily hundreds of people who could be the right relationship for them. And part of the work that I do with women is helping to develop that sense inside of ourselves, even if we are an anxious attachment. How do we develop our own sense of self-worth and self-esteem and self-value in a way that we don't allow ourselves to get involved with people who are crazy making, or who are gaslighting, or who are avoidant, or who are narcissistic? I mean, there's a lot out there that we're dealing with, right? Ultimately, this is the wounding of the planet. And we do our own work, and we do our best to match ourselves up with somebody else who's willing to do their work. And part of my work with women is learning how to date in a way that you find out up front whether a person has the ability to be a good mate. So that is a big chunk of the work that I do, and a big chunk of what I offer in sessions with women. I do want to cover a couple of things right now before we go into Q&A around how do you stop doing all of those things. So I'd like to offer you a couple of tools that you can start using right away so that you can start shifting this for yourself. I mentioned before overgiving, and I want to talk about overgiving for a minute because it's a pattern that a lot of women fall into. And what it creates in our relationships is it creates very unhappy, unsatisfied women and very unhappy, complacent men. So men need to work for their relationships. And because we are, as women, so powerful and strong in ourselves, and we know the value of relationships and what they mean in our lives, and we bond through oxytocin. Men do not. This is a super important thing for you to know, ladies. Our bodies are built to bond so that we can carry babies, birth babies, nurse babies, and have a protective man around us while we do that. So we're built to bond through oxytocin. And some of us bond first kiss. Some of us a little later down the road. Some of us, some heavy petting will do it. Some of us, it takes until we get to orgasm. When we orgasm with a man, our bodies produce tremendous amounts of oxytocin, and we will bond with him even if he's bad for us. Men do not bond in that way. Men bond through the commitments they make and keep. And this is a very big misunderstanding in women about men. And it's huge. If you can just get that, just know that if you want commitment from him, it needs to be established before you have sex with him. And there are a lot of varying opinions on that. And my work is based in feminine principles and how the feminine body works and how the feminine psyche works. And I'm a huge component for commitment before sex. And I just want to say to you that this is a big awareness that I think it's really important for women to have. We bond through oxytocin, which comes through touching. Men bond through the commitments they make and keep. They do not bond through touching in the same way that we do. Yeah. So okay. So I have a comment that says, such a good idea to get commitment before sex, but very hard in this day and age. Yes, hard, but not impossible. And from my perspective, if he doesn't want to give you commitment before sex, next, he's not the one. Period. It's that simple. So this is one of the tools that I like to offer to women. I like to say, ladies, get yourself some standards and stick to them, because the kind of man that you want will respect a woman with standards. And you have to give him those standards up front, and you have to stick to them. And you know what? In the online dating realm, it sort of looks like the hookup world right now. But what's true is, if you know how to date online as a savvy woman who is centered in principles that work, online dating can be one of your best tools for meeting the right kind of guy. Because if you know how to read their profiles and what they're bringing through their profiles and what they bring to you through their emails, okay, Devin, I want to address that in a moment. What they bring to you through their emails, then you know already up front who they are. You start vetting before you even meet them. So you don't spend your time going on endless dates looking for the right guy. You get it up front. So, right, coming back to complacency. So men, when we overgive, we do their work for them. When a man has a woman who does his work for him, he becomes complacent. If you want a man who's not complacent, stop doing his work for him. It's that simple. So if you're in a relationship where, thanks, Pat. If you're in a relationship where, she says, speak it, sister, where you're already into some of these dynamics and your guy is kind of, not really showing up and not present, and maybe he was super hot on you for a while and then he sort of became lazy, just stop. Stop doing his laundry for him, stop making his food for him, stop doing his dishes for him, stop calling him, stop texting, just stop. And, Marianne Williamson puts this in a really brilliant way. She says, in the book Enchanted Love, which is an amazing book about spiritual romantic relationships, she says it's like being on a tug of war rope, and you're just pulling and pulling and pulling on him. But if you drop the rope, it gets all wobbly on his side and he has to go, wait a minute. And he starts, flipping the rope. Why aren't you doing the work anymore? It's what gets their attention. It works. So, that's one thing I would offer to you. If you're already dealing with that kind of complacency, just stop doing the work. Okay, so Ilka says it's tricky when there are children involved. How to stop doing all the work, the child suffers. You don't stop doing the work for your child. You stop doing the work for the man. So it's true. It's tricky when children are involved. That's and even like a whole other realm of relationship. And there's a way that we stop showing up too. We stop doing the things that we did in the beginning of the relationship to get their attention. We stop putting our makeup on. We stop wearing pretty clothes. We start hanging out in our sweats. We stop feeling sexy. There are ways that we have to take care of ourselves in this too. Kim says the man is responsible to make the relationship good with his children. It's not up to us. That's correct. I was not suggesting that it's your responsibility to make his relationship with the child good. I was suggesting that it's your responsibility to show up to him in a way that you're not doing his emotional work in the relationship with you. So in my mind, when children are involved, those are different relationships. There's a relationship between the man and the woman. There's a relationship between the mother and the child, and there's a relationship between the father and the child. From my perspective, it is the man's job to take care of his relationship with his children. It's also his job to take care of his relationship with his woman. It's the woman's job to take care of her relationship with her children, and it's the woman's job to take care of her side of the relationship with the man. And what we tend to do as women is we start taking care of everybody. We take care of our relationship with the children, we take care of his relationship with the children, we take care of our relationship with him, so he has to do nothing. And Kim says, I agree. I felt I had to make things good, but when I stopped, it got better. Right, exactly. So stopping that's a big piece. I also want to say a thing about complacency here, and I want to acknowledge the time. Please keep sending your questions in so that I can address them. I got super excited about all the things that I could share with you, and we went over a little further than I thought I would before we get to Q&A. So please keep writing things in as they come. I want to speak about complacency. There's an interesting dynamic that happens in us as women where we overgive, and at the same time, our inner masculine is complacent. So if you're, GB says, what if you're naturally nurturing and want to be of help? It's so hard not to do stuff. Oh yeah, it's true. When we're naturally nurturing, it's really hard for us. And we probably did a lot of that as children. And so it's really familiar for us to keep doing it. Kathleen says, I find it should be coming from a place where my cup is already full. Absolutely. I am going to come back to this note on complacency and the inner masculine. But I want to address this place about the cup being full. It is our job to keep our own cup full. And when we are in our own feminine and we are in relationship with a masculine, healthy male, they will feed us in a way that keeps our cup full. It will help our cup be full and overflowing, but it is not their job to do so. It is our job to do so. And that's a place where the mystery school really comes in. So as I described to you earlier, her mystery school is all about deep feminine wisdom teachings. And a big, huge part of those teachings is about addressing our own cup. Does it have cracks in it? Are we leaking energy out? Are we filling it up? Are we even clear about how to fill it up? And the beauty of being in a sisterhood where we together are addressing the cup and how to keep it full, how to keep going to the deep well, how to draw from the deep well, how to have ourselves so filled up that we are overflowing with it, is a beautiful, beautiful journey that the mystery school offers. So again, I do want to encourage you to take a look at what the mystery school offers, especially if this piece around how do I fill my cup, how do I keep myself filled up, and how do I keep relating with another person in the midst of all of that. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. I just want to say that what we're talking about is not easy. And in my mind, the things that are most valuable in life aren't easy. I think we can come to a place where ease happens, and we have to learn to do that. And when we're navigating these kinds of dynamics, it's really not easy. So definitely want to encourage you to check out hermysteryschool.com. Look at all of what's offered through the school. Look at what each of the 9 months is. Look at the mentorships that are available. It's an amazing program that is really creating such a sense of having found home. That's a lot of what we get in feedback from women who are in the mystery school program. I feel like I finally come home to myself. So I just want to encourage you to have a look at that, to feel into whether that's a place for you. I want to come back now to this piece about complacency in the inner masculine. And this is a big part of the work that I do with women. It is my experience that when I have a man showing up in my life who's super complacent, there's some way that my inner masculine is being complacent as well. So in finding balance inside of ourselves, there's our feminine, there's our Shakti, which is our creative life force. It's our sexual energy. It's how we create in the world. It's how we create babies. It's how we create art. It's how we create projects. It's how we show up in our feminine and in our radiance and how we build that radiance. And it is so what this world is hungry for right now. So it is on us to learn to do that in ourselves and to give it. Along with that is our inner masculine. And the job of the masculine in masculine feminine dynamics is to protect, provide, and cherish. So if I'm not utilizing my inner masculine energy to protect for my feminine, provide for my feminine, cherish my feminine, and that's a deep art, and it's again a big part of my work that I offer in my coaching sessions. And yes, in answer to this question, I do the mystery school, and I'm a mentor in the mystery school. And you can see my mentorships that I offer on the mentorships page there. I do also private coaching sessions with women, and if you're interested in knowing more about that, I'll be giving that information here in a minute. But to finish this piece about the inner masculine, if my guy is showing up complacently, it is almost certain that my inner masculine is being complacent with my inner feminine. And if I want him to shift, if I shift inside of myself, he'll show up. I have seen this happen over and over again in my own life and in the lives of my clients. And this is a deep, rich, potent piece of work around, it's easy for us to look out in the world and see how the masculine is wounded, right? We see it everywhere. And what's true is that our own inner masculine carries that same kind of wounding. And the place we can most easily address it and heal it is the inner masculine in ourselves. And the more we do that, the more we call forward masculine outside of ourselves. Okay, so here's some other questions that are coming in. How do we do work on our inner masculine? How do we know it's weak? Well, one of the ways that you know it's weak is, are you having weak men showing up in your life? If it's a man who's already in your life, or if you're not getting dates, or if you haven't had a relationship for a long time, meaning there's no real masculine showing up in your life, or it's showing up in a super weak way, then that's a really, really strong indicator that your inner masculine could use some work. Okay, what about holding on to toxic cords? What's the best way to release ourselves from those bonds? Great question. So there are a lot of different rituals that you can do and ceremonies you can do to cut cords. And it's very similar actually to the tendril gathering experience that we did earlier, except in the reverse. So what I recommend to women to do is, well, I'll give you one ritual right now. Draw yourself a bath, a hot bath, and get into the bathtub with some candles lit and some low lighting and maybe some essential oils or bath salts. And imagine that you can bring all of your attention and awareness into your womb space and sort of energetically bleed him out into the water in the tub. So imagine that you can see whatever ways he's been hooked into your womb and into your Shakti, just sort of releasing gently and out into the water for as long as it takes. Just keep breathing into it until you feel complete. And then sit yourself all the way back to the back of the bathtub, away from the drain, and let the water out and watch it go down the drain. That's one of the most potent rituals that I know to release cords and bonds from men. And sometimes it takes, a couple of times. And it's a beautiful way to really love yourself in it and to let go of what's not serving you. Heather says, I think this inner masculine work would be a great webinar in itself. It's a lot of work and wounding there. Agreed. Actually, that's a really great idea. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, you're welcome, Devin. She says she's going to do this work tonight. So if you are a woman who's navigating some of these issues that we've talked about today, who's having difficulty, who could use some support and would like some right away, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to give you my email address. I'm going to put it in the chat box for you right now. And then I'll speak it out loud too for those of you who are listening and aren't seeing the chat. So my email address is Deonesea, my name, @gmail.com. So that's D like Daisy, E-O-N like Nancy, E-S like Sequoia, E-A @gmail.com. Deonesea @gmail.com. I offer 20-minute free discovery sessions for women who are working with some of these things and wondering if I might be the right support for them. Please feel free to reach out. I'd be so happy to have one of those discovery sessions with you to see if this feels like a right fit for you. And again, please go to the Her Mystery School website and check that out as well. I'm going to put that web address here in the chat for you too. We begin the 9-month journey again in September, on the new moon of September 9th, as I said before. And between now and then, we'll be offering more webinars for you, more free content for you. We really want to sort of bring you in with us. We feel you. We know you're out there. We know you're doing your work. We know that you value these teachings. We know that the feminine is rising through you. We know how much you're needed. We know how much your hearts are longing. And we really want to be with you in that. We want you with us in that. So please do reach out. I'll take just a couple of last questions here before we finish up for the day. Like I said, check out the Her Mystery School website. You can see my website too. I'll put that up there for you. That's passionasprayer.com. I can spell. Here we go. There it is. And again, feel free to email me with any questions or thoughts that you have. If you want to connect with me for one of those free discovery sessions, I'd be so happy to speak with you. That contact information again is Deonesea @gmail.com. So you're so welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much, ladies, for all that you're doing and all of the ways that you're showing up. It's nice to meet you too, Kathleen. Eva, you're so not alone. We are all together in this. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. One last question that did come in that I'll address right here. How do we start working with our inner masculine? One of the best ways that I know to do that is get on purpose. Go to your meditation, go for a walk in the forest, go to your altar, ask your feminine what she's needing. Does she need more rest? Does she need more expression? Does she need more art? What does she need? And then make a plan for how you're going to give it to her. That's the first step in engaging your inner masculine in the service of your inner feminine. You're so welcome. Yes, there will be a recording. We will be putting the recording up on a page on the Her Mystery School site. We'll be sending that out via email so that you have all the information about how to access the webinar again through the recording. Please share with other women who you think might be interested. We really need each other. It's time. It's time for us to do this. It's time for us to be together and doing this. And I will look forward to hearing from you, hopefully via email, and for sure as we go along with the mystery school. Thanks so much, ladies. I wish you all the best in all of your relations. Blessed be.